Check, check, check. Is on? Check, welcome. Check, welcome. Hey, welcome back to the Oat Show. It's midday. We're moving along very nicely on gifts. We have over 670 gifts, $245,000. Actually, let's be mathematical. 245, 717, 76 raised for Calvert Hall. That for our 8 years of all day holiday, we've now surpassed the $2 million mark, which is awesome. Thank you so much for everybody's making those contributions. And we see the scroll going. We've had the scroll. Well, it doesn't go by. You have to press the button to make it go by. But lots of great gifts in memory and honor of Calvert Hall, students of the day, faculty of the day, and certainly some of the great legends of the hall. So it's a very nice way to recognize people's contributions to Calvert Hall. We're with a kind of a group of alums who work at Calvert Hall or have worked at Calvert Hall over the years, and we're just going to have a little conversation. I've got Tom Alston to my left, Calvert Hall class of '84, stellar Algebra 1 student when I taught him many years ago. Tom is our director of major gifts officer and does our legacy giving here at Calvert Hall. This is his second stint at Calvert Hall. He's done some coaching also along the way. Next to him, we have Dave Hallman, Calvert Hall class of 2008. English teacher by original trade, does a great job with that, but also now the director of our McMullen Scholars Program, which is just an outstanding program that our top students, and we'll have Dave maybe talk a little about that in a second. Next to Dave is Mike Popovic, class of 97. Mike is 98. I told him he was 97. He told me he was 98. I'm just doing the best I can. Mike Popovic, class of 98. Mike is Tom's gonna we're gonna have stadium seating for a second. We're gonna have stadium seating, and Mike can be heard. Mike can be heard across the state of Maryland on the radio. You probably heard him on the Fan. You can hear him in Salisbury, all kinds of places, doing all kinds of things. Mike did a little stint, did some coaching here at Calvert Hall also. Will Line, I'll try to get the classes right. Class of 2005. Will is our director of our admissions program here at Calvert Hall. He's been in the admissions program for a couple years now, and this year the incoming class of 2027 is going to be over maybe 340 students, something like that. Will, does that sound right?
That is correct.
That's an amazing recruiting job going against the other schools in the area, and they really have a hard time keeping up with Will. And on the far end, class of 83, our principal, Mr. Chuck Stembler, also an amazing calculus student when he and I worked together. So we've got a lot of good math students here, so just to talk about that. So why don't we kick it off? We're just going to kick it around a little bit. Well, why don't we kick it off with Chuck? Talk a little about Calvert Hall today and your experience, principal. What we're looking like going forward.
Great. Thanks, Joe. I would say that the Calvert Hall is a unique blend. I think that if you haven't been on campus in a long time, there are some things that are very traditional and some things you would see exactly the same. So in some ways, in terms of values, Calvert Hall is the same, and yet in a lot of ways, it's a lot different as we change and we adapt to the times, whether that be in a curricular fashion, whether that be in terms of activities. I think one of the things that's the same that I think people would say, whether you graduated 30 years ago or you graduate today, is that we value the diversity of our student body, that we are a place of diversity. I think we value the diversity. If you asked our guys what the greatest asset of Calvert Hall is, they would say diversity. And a lot of times I think people only assume that that's racial or ethnic diversity, which we clearly have. But we really also talk a lot about our socioeconomic diversity. We have guys here who are very, very rich and guys really that really struggle to be here and make huge sacrifices to be here. Will talks a lot about our geographic diversity from 128 zip codes. Guys come from far Howard County, from Pennsylvania, from over the Bay Bridge sometimes, really all over. And we really believe that diversity, it really enriches the experience of all of our students. And then the final thing we talk a lot about is diversity of passion. We have 60-plus clubs. We have 40 athletic teams, and we really believe that's one of our great strengths, that people come here, sometimes because they want to be in the art program, they want to be in the band, they want to be a McMullen Scholar, they want to play soccer. And at Calvert Hall, you can do your own thing. We really believe that we have something for everybody. So I think, in a lot of ways, Calvert Hall is the same. Our values are the same. It is the values of the Christian Brothers that, we've done for 170-plus years. But I think we change and we adapt, and we try new things. Joe, you good?
That's great. That's awesome. It's great. Hey, let's go to Tom Malmstrom. Tom, now, Tom's got a legacy connection to Calvert Hall. Tom is also very involved in the Alumni Association. Tom, talk to us a little bit about, one, the Alumni Association, what that's meant to Calvert Hall over the years, but also maybe take us back as far as you can to some of those decades before, and maybe mention some of those legendary names of the past from Calvert Hall.
Sure, yeah. So, the history, certainly for the last 40-plus years, the advancement effort, the development office has been a very, very key component of the school and the campus, and tuition only, as Joe often says, tuition covers a lot of things, but it doesn't cover it all. So we depend on generous benefactors, alumni and friends to help us with those extras, whether it's when we need a new building, when we need to redo a tech lab, anything along the way. So, but it wasn't always the case. Many, many years ago, in fact, it probably really kind of got a strong foothold when Brother Gabe Cannon in the 50s was looking to move the school from Cathedral Mulberry to the Towson campus way in the suburbs. He went to a group of alumni who had formed an alumni association after World War II, and kind of spearheaded that initial effort to get the business community, the alumni community involved in helping secure the funds. Certainly a number of people were involved in that, many more than I could name. Jim Keelty probably being the main cog in that component, who Keelty, the family had in their development portfolio, had a lot of the land in this area. What became Udawood across the street, and certainly Mr. Keelty, class of 1929, made it possible for the school to financially afford to acquire the land to build the site of the new Calvert Hall. My father, Bill Malmstrom, was class of 1940, part of a group with George McManus, Frank Clary, class of 53, that organized that alumni association to kind of be that alumni committee per se of that campaign to make it possible to move to Towson. Over the years, my family certainly has had a long connection. I'm one of 9 children, 7 boys. 6 of us all attended Calvert Hall. My one brother who did not actually probably has more volunteer hours here with bull roasts and crab feasts and homecomings than a lot of alumni. But yeah, my oldest brother and my oldest sister, who are twins, my sister Barbara Jones is 20, I'm going to get it wrong and she's probably going to kill me, 22 or 23 years now as a faculty member in the religion department. My wife Tracy is the assistant to Mr. Stembler in the front office. So yeah, certainly, as Joe mentioned, this is my second stint working here. Worked from 1996 to 2004. Went on to some other opportunities, made a major move, moving to Florida. My wife and I decided to move back, and within a year of being back, we're both working at Calvert Hall. So certainly it's in the blood. I spent 4 years as president of the Alumni Association in the early 2010s. Yeah, we kind of bleed cardinal and gold in our house.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, while we stay in the legacy world, why don't we go over to Mike Popovic? So, Mike, a couple things I'd like you to kind of hit on. One, your legacy connection to Calvert Hall, and then maybe talk a little bit about you had an opportunity to not only go to Calvert Hall, and you can talk about what you did while you're here, but you also coached a little bit. So give us a little feedback on that.
So my Uncle Steven's class of 65, my Uncle Phil class of 70, my dad class of 73, and then 25 years later, class of 98. So it was a family heritage. And I remember, my dad, though, wanted me to have a true Calvert Hall experience. He didn't push me to go, but I'm telling you, as soon as I got here and went through my day and touring the school and all that, I knew that I fit. I'd gone to a few other private schools, had visited, but this was the place for me. But this was a great opportunity for me here. And, Chris Compton, who's over on the side here, he gave me some opportunities with CHC TV, with doing some sports stuff, and also with PA announcing and DJing for the baseball games as well. So I got some experience here, which I really appreciate, and a top-notch education. And the amount of pride that I have for this school out in the community is vast. Obviously, yes, I'm a big sports guy as well. And when I went to Loyola College, graduating from here, I coached football and basketball here for my first 3 years, and then got into the finance field and then into media for the last almost 20 years. But I can't tell you how much the school means to me. And I tell you talk about being on the Eastern Shore, seeing all the Cardinal stickers and such on Coastal Highway or on Route 50 or what have you, and it feels like you're right back here in Baltimore. So, I love Calvert Hall, and that's why I give back. And my wife gets so tired of me talking about the high school experience, but at Calvert Hall, her experience was college. And I said, babe, that's just what it is. Baltimore, it's where you went to high school. And so I'm proud to have been able to continue the legacy here and continue to push Calvert Hall strong all the way.
So I'm probably going to need Mr. Malmstrom to help me on the year, but your Uncle Phil has a particularly noted role in the history of Calvert Hall. Yeah. What year was that game, Tom? The famous field goal game of Loyola? Was it 69?
I think it was the 69.
69 game at Memorial Stadium. Calvert Hall beats Loyola on a Phil Marsiglia field goal. Phil was not the regular kicker, I don't think, and
No, he was
rolled
a
out for an
backup.
emergency kick, goes through. It's on film. I've seen it. I've got a picture of it on my desk. But what was the role of your uncle? One of the most critical roles in the history of Calvert Hall.
Right. So my uncle was a quarterback, but he was the holder on that kick, and Bruce Wills was the center and the snapper on that. And it was a bit of a high snap, and my uncle did a good job of getting the ball, raising up, getting the ball down so that Marsiglia could kick that field goal, which I think was a 42-yarder, but they say it could have been as good from 53 yards. And, the funny thing about that is I was a month into here to Calvert Hall, and Mrs. Thomas had filled in for a homeroom for Mr. Sundell in the cafeteria. And when she heard my name and going through roll call, she said, Popovic, is Phil your dad or your uncle? And I said, no, it's my uncle. And she talked about the kick and all that. And, quickly, you found out that's the name here. And Uncle Phil never lets us forget during Thanksgiving about that. But that was a big time. And
it's a memory for the ages.
It is. That's right. And I don't think
Absolutely.
anything else the rest of our Popovics could outshadow that.
That's right. Exactly. All right. All right. Let's go over to Dave Hallman. Dave, talk a little bit about lead the McMullen program. Our top students, they're, as you know, they take a lot of advanced classes, et cetera. But I think what I always like to say about the McMullen program, it's an enriched program. They're doing things above and beyond just the classes, right? So talk about a little bit about the enrichment of the McMullen program.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, Joe. I'd be happy to. And I also do want to say that, wow, this is an honor to be on a panel like this. I'm the young gun here on the group, and I'm just really grateful to get to talk to our alumni. So, so let's see. So the McMullen program, what's so exciting about it is thanks to the innovation of Mr. Louis Miserandino, who is the former director, class of '99. From when I was at McMullen, as fun as it was, we only went on a couple field trips in 4 years' time. By the time that I had returned back first as a teacher who helped with the McMullen program and now as its director, we are constantly hitting the road. We're constantly traveling. Just a few weeks ago, I had 44 students. We had traveled up. First, we made a stop at Yale University to visit Will Archacki, who had just graduated as a McMullen Scholar last year. He was our class valedictorian. We got to hear about his experience at Yale and also about an internship he's going to be doing with chemical engineering this summer. We then continued on to Boston, and it's not just the Eastern Shore where everyone has their Calvert Hall pride. Even walking around Beantown, we were in the neighborhood of Fenway Park, and there were people coming up to us. Hey, I went to Mercy High School. I was a cheerleader at Calvert Hall. Or, hey, I went to Towson High. Oh, my gosh, all my friends went to Calvert Hall. So it's just so special to be reminded of that. We visited Boston in college. We visited MIT. We went to Harvard. And we went to Northeastern, too. We've done trips to Philly in the past year, trips to D.C. We've done trips to University of Virginia and Virginia Tech. And also to New York City. We go up to New York City at least once a year. We stay in Times Square. We will go and split out in different groups, and everyone gets to see a different play on Broadway. We visit the Museum of Modern Art. And it's just so much fun to get outside the classroom and try and build relationships with students that extends well beyond their learning. Beyond that, also talking about our alumni influence, which I think maybe we're soon going to a great McMullen alumnus, Mr. Will Welline, we've been able to start going out and building connections with our alumni base that in just a short amount of time have yielded some really valuable opportunities for our students. Matt Minogue, who is about to graduate from Purdue with a degree in aerospace engineering, class of 2019, he actually hosted a group of students at the NASA Goddard Space Flight Center last summer for a field trip. We were at Goddard the day after President Biden had been there, after different members of the House, different members of the Senate were there to celebrate the launch of the James Webb Space Telescope. Calvert Hall McMullen scholars were there the following day with Matt getting a tour and learning about the work that he was doing there as an intern. We're also down, hey, we can keep it in D.C. We can keep it a little bit political. We toured the Capitol building in November with Dan Zawatowski, who is a member of the class of 2005. Will's classmate, who is now chief of staff to a congressman from the San Diego district in California. And it was so special to get to hear about how even in his work now on the Hill, he still draws from work that he did in AP European history with Dr. Andy Moore, who was the director of the McMullen program when Will and I were a part of it. So, yeah, plenty of enrichment for you.
Plenty of things to do, yep. Let's talk to Will Welline a little bit. Will, you're the face of Calvert Hall out in the community. You're the guy, really, we like to say Calvert Hall is about the people. And, we certainly have great teachers, but it's the great students that we get to come here, right? So what is it you're doing out? How are you presenting Calvert Hall? What's the way that you're letting people know this is the place to be?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Baker. And I think it's an honor to be able to serve in the role of admissions director at Calvert Hall. You made the joke that I'm the face of Calvert Hall to a lot of those people, but trust me, this is not the face that everybody wants to see. And it really is the people behind the scenes and the other stakeholders that we have here in the community that really make this place special. Mr. Stembler alluded to it earlier that we are all about talent here at Calvert Hall. One of our cliche sayings is that it is cool to be talented, and that takes a lot of different shapes and forms. So as my team and I are going out on the road and thinking about what the future of Calvert Hall looks like, really the first thing we're looking for is this guy a Calvert Hall guy? And I know when folks ask me that question and how to define it, there really isn't one answer that we can give to that because we do value people from multiple backgrounds. We value guys that are talented academically, young men that are talented in the theater arts. We recently put on a production of The Addams Family, which was phenomenal, and I know that the news station was here to cover some of that. So it's not just one singular talent or experience we're looking for, but at the core of all of that, in my opinion, is the value of relationships. And one of my goals and the admissions team's goal is to provide an individualized experience for every prospective family that walks through the front doors of Calvert Hall. Yes, we know that we are one of the largest private schools in the Baltimore area, but the reality of it is when you come here, you are not a number. You will build lifelong rapport and relationships with teachers and coaches and moderators, school counselors, so on and so forth. And that's really what drove me to come back to Calvert Hall in a professional capacity to begin with, really just so that I could give back to young men in the way that a lot of teachers and other folks here did when I was a student back in the early 2000s. So I think it's partly just showcasing the school and the immense value that we bring to a young man, but also with an eye towards preparedness for later on in life. I often joke with people and my friends that college was a breeze to me. My master's program was a breeze to me compared to my experience at Calvert Hall. And I think that has a lot to do with the academic rigor of our program and the commitment that the faculty and staff members have to make sure each student has that experience that sets them up for the rest of their life.
That's awesome. You're doing a great job, too. It's
Thank
really making things happen. Chuck, we have a wide variety. One of the nice things about Calvert Hall, the wide variety of activities. I shouldn't whatever number I make up, there's more than I say. So, but the thing I always liked about their activities is a variety of the types of activities. So you could be in the lawn games club, and just play when you want. Guitar club, likewise. You could be in the yearbook, spending a lot of time, etc. But we have a couple groups I'd like to highlight, Chuck, that are kind of like competitive / academic clubs. I'm thinking of speech and debate, Model UN, the robotics, the cyber, mock trial. Talk a little bit how that's kind of grown and really contributing to great experience for guys.
Right, exactly. And Joe, you're absolutely right that when we designed both the activities program and the athletics program, we really put them on a spectrum because we really do want to have something for everybody. And as you point out, some guys, they want an intense experience that's something they do every single day. And other guys, they want to show up, for intramurals once a week, or they want to do, a particular club once a month. And we really pride ourselves on that notion that we have something for everybody that Will talks about. I would say that probably over the last 10 years, one of the things that has grown in activities the most are some of the activities that you've mentioned, really a competitive nature, whether it be robotics or it's academic or mock trial or speech and debate, that really people have hungered for a more intense experience. I think if you go back to guys who were here 20 or 30 years ago in terms of activities, we had a lot of activities, but I don't know they were of the competitive nature. And I think as programs have developed, I would tell you the program that has grown the most over the last 5 years is robotics. I mean, we have crazy good guys that are world ranked in robotics. And in fact, we have a robotics center at the top of the stadium. And when you go there, you're just, it's amazing the level of competitiveness and intensity and the commitment that they have. I mean, these are programs that are every day after school and on weekends, and I often joke with the faculty, when I go up there, they're upset because the robot arm went 35 degrees instead of 36. And I'm like, I'd be happy if I got the robot arm to move, so they really, I mean, it is awesome. We look at speech and debate. We have guys going to both nationals this year. That is a program that, again, has grown tremendously. And part of what I think, Joe, which is what you talked about, is I really think these are life skills which set guys up for the future. I think in the world that we live in, with technology being what it is, the ability to communicate is incredibly important. Nowadays it used to be, you used to memorize a lot of facts. Well, now you can just Google everything. So the notion of memorization, while still important, it's really now about skill development. So the ability to communicate and the skills, and really robotics guys, they're going on to college. One guy, Casey Borough, I mean, he just graduated and got his foundation really in the robotics program, and he's doing awesome things. So you're absolutely right. I think that those programs have grown tremendously because of a hunger and a desire for guys to be really successful.
That's great. It's great. Mike Popovic, you've really developed a career for yourself, kind of an athletic career for in the athletic world. And it's not just because you have a good radio voice, right? I mean, you've done a ton of games. You've seen a ton of games. You've high school, college. You're prepping up for Terp games, and you're doing Terp scores and all that kind of stuff. So, Mike, and I know you might not be completely objective on this, but when you see the Calvert Hall teams, and you've seen a ton of teams at all levels, what do you think about when you see a Calvert Hall team come out on the field?
Well, I mean, there's a gold standard. There's a level of expectation there of all the teams, and the fact that they're committed not only to on the field but off the field as well, making sure they get the kind of academic experience that's important for them to go to the next level. But I think of excellence. I think of the standard they're held to, and the gold jackets are the norm around here. So I think it's continuing to build on the tradition, and that putting on that Calvert Hall jersey means a lot, and that that other teams are going to be gearing for you. There's a heritage there with Calvert Hall, so you need to be at your very best. But I know that those teams being put on the field are coached well, and they're ready to go, and the fact that they're going to represent the school well, and they're going to do us proud, and they've done so. And again, this year's another example of that, as we're seeing. And again, I have immense pride when I take a look online in the newspapers, on the radio, and being able to see Calvert Hall wins this game, beats that team, wins that championship. I mean, that's outstanding. And again, the things you learn in athletics are the things you're going to take into the quote unquote real world with you, and that certainly was the case for me in playing football and basketball here, with discipline, hard work, and a commitment to excellence.
That's awesome. Tom Malmstrom, we talk about at Calvert Hall, you're making friends for life, and you'll be friends with your classmates, which is absolutely the case. We just had a reunion the other day, class of 53, 70th year reunion, guys still getting together. Those social connections are awesome, but one thing people may not recognize is the networking that's available to students after they graduate, and how they can utilize that networking. Like I always say, kids, not always to get the job. I mean, you got to do the job, but the networking open doors. Talk a little bit, Tom, about your experience with the ability to take that Calvert Hall experience and get you other opportunities.
Well, sure. I mean, I think when you have a network of what do we say, round number 15,000 living alumni, with a large percentage of those in the Metro Baltimore area. But even now, certainly in other cities, we had an incident. Who was it the other day, Joe? Somebody was talking about their son got a LinkedIn message. Their son, who graduated 5 or 6 years ago, was in college or finished college in a graduate program. Got a LinkedIn message from an older alum who happened to live in the area and was inquiring if he'd want to talk to him about opportunities that the older alum had at their business. So yeah, it's certainly out there. I think as to your point, there is a certain understanding that when you say you went to Calvert Hall, that you've reached a certain standard. It'll certainly get you the phone answered or the interview. There is a lot of that fraternity being a brother's boy, as some of the older alumni would say. It is. It's certainly worked for me over my career. there's always a link. Joe, you talk about it. Whether you graduated in 1940, you graduated in 1967, or for me, 1984. There's similarities. Whether it's longtime faculty members that overlapped when they were there and you're there. I would like to add that Mr. Baker is in his 43rd year. He and Charlie Matze are oldest teaching members on the faculty, longest tenured, along with Eric Rogers, I guess, in the maintenance staff. Been here about the same. So yeah, it's certainly a fellowship there.
And can I add to that, Joe?
Yep.
Because I think the other thing that's really crucial is that really benefits our even our current students. For example, we have a program called the Leadership Institute, and so just the last couple weeks, we used some of our Calvert Hall connections. Frank Bramble was here to talk about leadership. He's on the board of Bank of America. Just this week, Mike Gill, who was the Secretary of Commerce for Larry Hogan and used to be the chair of the board at the University of Maryland St. Joe's, they talked to our guys about in terms of their thought process of what are the most important qualities of a leader. And so when you can use a lot of these connections, I think that's a great academic experience for our guys, just to hear people who have been so successful out in the world. And I think that helps our guys just being here as high school students.
Great.
If I can add to that too, so I think there's a.
No, you can't.
Yeah.
You can't.
Yeah.
You have my energy going here, Mr. Stembler, right? I think the other piece here is a little bit of a bridge between what Chuck mentioned, and I think it was Dave or Mike earlier. The Cardinal brand itself, right, speaks volumes and is well known in the area. And I've heard countless stories of young men being interested in Calvert Hall solely for the reason that they saw so many Cardinal stickers on the road. Yeah. And that sounds so basic at kind of a roots level, but getting that initial interest and then having that brand connected to you can only help you and afford you opportunities later on in life. And that Calvert Hall name on your resume when it comes to applying for the most prestigious colleges or obtaining professional employment, it carries weight that sticks for the rest of your life, and I think all of us here can attest to that.
That little participation chain reminds me of being in Honors World Cultures with Mr. Dave Shannon when I was a sophomore, and Dave was without fail an awesome teacher. But he used to track participation. So if you participated, you got a mark. So, Dave Hallman would raise his hand, talk about the American Constitution, et cetera. He'd get a mark, And then Mike would raise his hand, talk about the Bill of Rights and, all through all that kind of stuff, and he would get a mark. And then Tom would raise his hand and say, I agree with those two guys, and he would get a mark, right? So soon everybody figured out. You just had to say, hey, I agree with him. So there we go. So please feel free to jump in at any time. Will, talk a little bit about when those kids either we know the benefit of the guest day. We give credit to I think we give credit to Chris Spangle who banned the word shadow day, right? Because he didn't think it was respectful.
Forbidden term,
right? And we use the word guest. When those students come for the guest day, or they come to open house, what is it they see, in your opinion, about Calvert Hall that says, hey, this, because there are, I hate to say it, there are other good options out there, right? Okay, I'm just going to stretch out. Let's say hypothetically, there are other good options out there. What is it they see about Calvert Hall that kind of like sells them? What is the selling points?
Sure, I think the number one goal with that is when they walk through our front doors, whether it's for that Cardinal for a day, an open house, or any other type of event, the number one thing is we want that student and his family to feel like they're already part of the Calvert Hall community. And I think the immediate thing that gets noticed right off the bat is when you walk through the campus of Calvert Hall, this place is bigger than any one of us. And you are part of a brotherhood and a community that spans 178 years, 16,000 living alumni, 1,200 current students, plus our faculty, staff, and coaches. And there really is just that sense of belonging and community that ties it all together. It's funny you say about the importance of that visit day, Mr. Baker. So at the end of every admission season, we always survey our incoming students. By far, the number one most impactful experience they have in choosing Calvert Hall is that visit day. And it's because they get to experience the excellent teachers. They get to realize that Calvert Hall is a fun place, right? We are a rigorous academic school, but we want to make learning fun. And we want to have the opportunity for guys to build those friendships that will last them forever. And once you're here, you're part of this place forever.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Tom Alstrom, you've been involved at Calvert Hall in philanthropy, being part of our giving program when you were here on your first stint and back end. But in between, you worked at some pretty major places, Hopkins, University of Maryland, University of Florida. This is a great day for Calvert Hall. Over 707 gifts right now, $253,000. Tell the people, Tom, like what this kind of day means for philanthropy and how this is not what happens other places all the time.
No, not at all. I mean, certainly the trend for having a day of giving or a giving day is not anything new. Of course, we're in our 8th annual, but they've been going on for 10 years or more. A lot of institutions rely on the Giving Tuesday, the Tuesday after Thanksgiving, and we really don't, because that's just another day to some degree. This is an important day for us because it's celebrating the feast day of St. John Baptist de La Salle. So it's a special day in the Lasallian, across the Lasallian institutions. For Calvert Hall, it's very special. And to your point, Joe, it's a unique place too. Almost humbling sometimes when you talk to people who want to make the Calvert Hall experience possible for others. Certainly we've been in the midst of the Hall 175 capital campaign, kind of in celebration of the 175th anniversary of the school, starting the campaign a few years ago. Tremendous participation, a very lofty goal to raise $28 million in this campaign period. We have about 14 months to go, 13 and a half months to go, and we're well over 24.5 million towards that $28 million goal. So we have every expectation we're gonna meet it. But it's just some of the stories, talking to people who are committing to be a part of it, and you go back. There's people that say, if it hadn't been for Brother Gabriel Cannon, my parents wouldn't have been able to get me into Calvert Hall. Or, Brother John always tells the story of Mr. Bindle, who used to live on LaSalle Road, class of '53. Saw Brother John almost his first day in the office 9 years ago, and told the story that his father died while he was a student at Calvert Hall, and he was all set to have to go to public school. And Brother Gabe said, no, you're coming back to Calvert Hall. Let me talk to your mother. There's not going to be an issue. So those kinds of stories resonate. As Calvert Hall moved to the Towson campus, and working with some alumni that are in the graduating years of the 60s and 70s, the stories changed a little bit. Maybe it's not the Brother Andy or Brother James Nash or somebody, but it's that experience that you spoke of earlier, to the 100 and whatever zip codes that's resonating, that's important to them. They want to make those alumni want to make sure that Calvert Hall continues as that kind of institution where a kid from East Baltimore or a kid from Guilford is enjoying the chance to have a Calvert Hall education. So it's humbling, and certainly there's that familial aspect to it. We've had in this campaign 47 new endowed scholarships created. Many of those are by families, groups of people that come together to honor a parent or their parents who made it possible, that sacrificed to send their kids here, their sons, and they now have the means to kind of pass that on to someone else down the line.
That's true. And and those stories about financial, where guys could, they say, hey, you start tomorrow even though we don't have enough money to make it, are absolutely true. Very powerful. But there's also stories about academics, right, where guys say, hey, I was struggling in this class or that class or lots of classes, and without this guidance counselor or without this teacher, I never would have made it through Calvert Hall. And that's who we are, right? And I think that's a really special part, and that's why people do give back on a day like today, because they understand the impact that they have. I used to always say Calvert Hall has lots of doors to get guys in, and I think that's really, really true. Will, talk a little bit about, just quickly, the sacrifice. Back in the day, they would say a kid took 73 buses to get here. It might have been really 72. They kind of pumped it up, the story. But tell people, because they might not know this, we say 100-plus zip codes, amazing, but how far do some guys come to get to Calvert Hall every day?
Yeah, so it's 128 zip codes, and we have students as far as southern Pennsylvania, over the Bay Bridge, so a young man that's driving over an hour and a half without traffic each way to come to Calvert Hall, and a young man that graduated a few years ago from Ashburn, Virginia. So making his way through that DC traffic each and every day. And then geographically within the state of Maryland, we represent pretty much every county that you can think of. So as close as right across the street here on LaSalle Road, as far west as Frederick, and even down south in Washington County. And I think that's a testament to the commitment of the Calvert Hall education and the opportunities that it provides, that especially moms and dads are willing to make that sacrifice and that time commitment each and every day for their son to be part of this brotherhood and to be able to experience the things that each of us have over our time at the hall.
Good. That's good. No, that's true. And some of those trips are pretty darn far. Moms and dads are putting a lot of mileage on their cars to make this happen. Chuck, give us a little sense on some things you got under the hood, like looking forward, new things you're thinking about, some new programs maybe. What do you got?
Right. So again, I think one of our challenges, one of the things that we have to make sure we're doing is always meeting the needs of students. So we talk to guys and talk to parents that we want to educate guys for jobs that haven't even been created yet. So I think kind of what we're thinking about a little bit, what's on the horizon for us is really this notion of the cyber world. The e-gaming world is hot right now, and trying to figure out a little bit how can that be both curricular and extracurricular, because there's a lot of coding. A lot of emphasis on that coding in the cyber world, and I think we're looking at maybe a new lab possibly in the future to kind of focus a little bit on that. So I think that's definitely we've undertaken this curriculum review to make sure that, again, are we teaching both content and skills, both horizontally and vertically planning, to make sure that we're positioning our guys for an excellent college experience. Right. And Joe, can I just say, just because we were talking about speech and debate before, two notes of things, so the folks doing the live stream can't see this, but we're looking at a TV of different all-day, all-day gifts. Number one, I've been amazed at the number of current students that are giving, that as we've sat here, and I mean, I don't know who else is watching this, but I've been kind of paying attention, which I really think is significant because, I mean, clearly students, they don't have a ton of money to give, but the fact that they're giving something, that talks about their loyalty, their commitment to Calvert Hall, and how much they value the experience. And then we were talking about speech and debate, and one of the guys that's just up there now is Khalil Bennett. He's with his mom, and he made a gift for all day, and Khalil actually is the second student in 2 years to get a full ride to Emory because of speech and debate. We're the only school in the nation that has got it's the Woodruff Scholarship back-to-back winners, which is a full ride to Emory. So it's that kind of caliber student that graces our hallways at Calvert Hall, and it's that commitment that they have, which is just awesome. So
That's great. That's great. Dave, talk a little bit about the Capstone Project, because that's a special part of the McMullen program. Give a little sense of the variety and the amount of work that goes into it. And you're coming up your symposium.
Yeah, we are coming up on the symposium. So what I love to tell, maybe Will should know this, when I will meet with 8th graders and their parents, and they say, well, gosh, we've heard about this Capstone thing. I say, well, the record was set a couple years ago. We had Ben Sontag, class of 2021, who's at Dartmouth right now. Ben wrote 500 pages for his capstone, so, anything below 500 pages would be great. So Ben's at Dartmouth. His brother Andrew actually is graduating from the University of Pennsylvania this spring, and then I recently heard from him he's going to be starting at Princeton to get his master's in physics. So the Sontag boys are special. Ben had written a 400-page novel, and then almost like a 100-page research paper about depictions of heroism in post-war art, film, literature. It was awesome to read. Almost as difficult for me as the grader as it was for him as the student who was writing it. So there's. I have to give him an A. Oh yeah, well it was easy. It was easy. So there's just a huge variety of topics that our students are interested in. What I think is so exciting about the capstone, a lot of times it'll go one of two ways. So sometimes a student knows exactly what he wants to study in college, and so this is a chance for him to already begin his studies while he's in high school. We have guys who will go out and contact professors at colleges that they're applying to, and then sometimes those professors will mentor them through the research process. And then also advocate on those students' behalf to have them be accepted at the school where they work, to try and get them a scholarship at that school, to get them into an elite degree program at that school. So that's a really exciting way for it to work out, like starting college when you're still in high school. But for some other guys, and this is another story that I love to tell, you remember Tyler Wagner, class of 2008, my classmate?
Yep.
So Tyler Wagner had said, well, I know I'm going to MIT, and I know that I'm going to study science when I go there. And I've always wanted to write an epic poem. So I think I'm going to take my capstone as an opportunity to do something that I might not get the chance to do again, because my collegiate studies, and then, gosh, by the time it was our 10-year reunion, he already had a PhD. He went and wrote an epic poem for his capstone, and the rest of his career has taken him in completely different directions. Another recent example of that would be, he's probably watching, he'll probably text me after I say this, Dean the Dream Saraceni. So Dean about to graduate from the University of Maryland and has already started a master's in accounting there. Dean, it's great to think of you. Dean knew he was going to go and study finance, go and study accounting. So for his capstone, he wrote what was referred to as the Sarah Symphony, the Dean Saraceni Symphony. He had written all different songs and then conducted a group of student instrumentalists to perform those in a live setting. So those are some of my favorite stories, but this year it's a really exciting group. I have been able to see some of the presentations of different research projects that we're now, for these students, like 13 months into, that they've been working for over a year. And some highlights that I would say, Andy Geldmacher. Andy's going to Texas A&M, aerospace engineering. He wrote his capstone on like supersonic air travel, not only in terms of like what the future of it is, but also of how it's really also an environmentally friendly way to travel. We had Sam Hesseltine. Sam is heading down to Georgia Tech next fall, and he wrote his about the effect of social media use on the psychology of adolescence, and it was really fascinating and equally terrifying to read. So I loved those. And then, one kind of out of left field, but everyone has been commenting, even other teachers, that it's been really fascinating, is Ben Brune, who is going to be a Banneker Key Scholar this fall at Maryland, which means he's got a full scholarship for tuition, for room, for board, and for textbooks these next 4 years. And a little plug that we, this year, earned 3 Banneker Key scholarships to Maryland, and we'll have 3 Banneker Keys next year. Ben did his research paper on the negative environmental impacts of lawn maintenance and of what his recommendations are. And there's a ton of science that goes into this, of how to engineer a lawn that is energy efficient, kind to the environment. And it's just super fascinating to read through the work he's done. And most importantly of all, now I have an excuse to my wife as to why I don't have to mow the lawn as much. So yeah, just a little taste of capstones.
Awesome. No, that's a lot of work, and the thing about the capstone too, a lot of variety, right? Yes. It's not one
absolutely.
thing, everybody doing the same thing, and they get to pick it out. And the symposium is something you put together where you all present them, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the plug.
Yep.
So on Monday, May 22nd, if anyone's interested in attending, all of our 27 senior McMullen scholars will be presenting their capstone research from 3:30 to 6:30 p.m. on the 3rd floor of George Young Hall. It is an academic conference style event in 30-minute sessions. All 27 scholars will share out the work that they've done. And then afterwards, we're going to gather with our seniors and their families and celebrate the hard work that they've done. I actually have been really fortunate. I taught these guys as juniors in Honors Brit Lit, and then I moved up with them as seniors to AP English Lit, and then I've also taught them through the capstone. So they've had to suffer with me for 3 classes. They mean the world to me. I think I'm closer with this graduating class than any other that I've ever taught, and they have earned acceptances and scholarship offers to such a wide range of prestigious colleges around the country. I can't wait to celebrate them. I think we go all the way from Bates up in Maine, as far south down like Georgia Tech, I mentioned with Sam, and then all the way out to UCLA. My student Damien was recently accepted there, and just so many prestigious schools in between. So yeah, the symposium, May 22nd, George Young Hall, 3:30 to 6:30.
I went last year. It's good. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Joe.
Learned a little bit. I know a lot of those things, but I shook my head up and down. I pretended like I was learning a lot, but it was really,
Joe.
really good, really good. One of the things that's special about Calvert Hall, I think, over the years is the effort, relentlessness. People dive on the floor. That's a Calvert Hall concept, in my opinion. And Mike Popovic, you've done that in your profession, right? So I think, people talk about the 10,000 hours. You don't get something without 10,000 hours of practice. You've probably logged 3 times that. So give the audience a sense of all the different hats you got and what you wear in a week, because you got a lot going on.
I do. As a morning show host down at the beach, I mean, I'm on air. I produce. I have to get out in the community, establish relationships with people that are working in the community, mayors, councilmen, sports figures, high school athletes, what have you. You book those interviews and such. You're going out. I'm doing a little bit of sales from time to time as well. Just attending events.
Excuse me, Mike, in your morning show that you do, give them the time frame on that, and that's more like a news show, right?
Yeah, it's a local news and information interview type show from 5 until 9 that I do on a station out of the Lewis area, Lewis Rehoboth Beach area. But we cover most of the Eastern Shore. We've got 2 signals now, but it's very localized, and we're kind of a dying breed with that. But I tell you, it's been the greatest civics experience and history experience for me in getting to learn a lot about the everyday goings on. So I'm a big sports guy, but I'm a big history and civics guy as well. So in doing that job, that gives me that end of things as well. And so it's a lot of outreach, it's a lot of learning, a lot of communicating, a lot of representing as well. But I wear a lot of different hats there. Also commercial production, sports reports, again representing the station at events and such. And again, getting out, meeting people, and sometimes just going to things and kind of blending in and just absorbing in what's going on so that you have that in your mind. So that's that aspect of the full-time job. So probably 4 or 5 different hats there. And then with 105.7 The Fan, with the weekends, keeping up with all the things going on in sports. Obviously, social media is a big help because you've got all these stories on your news feed and all that you're keeping up on, listening to the radio constantly, and just it's ongoing. Every day you're learning, and it's a very busy time of it. I've got a 17-month-old baby girl who I love to death, and my wife who's been extremely supportive. But I think to your point about the 10,000 hours, and it really goes back to when I got admitted to Calvert Hall was, the slogan at the time was "Be a part of it," and Mr. Stembler talked about the amount of activities which has grown, but it was always about, look, you can be an 8 to 2 student or 8 to 3 student, but you're not going to get the full experience if you don't, and obviously you want to do something you want to do, but without doing additional things, and I think it's great to see all that has expanded since then, robotics, speech, you name it, it's outstanding. In fact, I may need to take some courses from the speech and debate. That'll help me as a talk show host and an interviewer as well, but it's really being passionate and immersing yourself. And look, I spent 6 days a week here doing various things. And even though I was heavily involved in sports, I was also in some other clubs that had nothing to do with sports here as well. But, yeah, it was being a part of it. And the same thing in my job in radio, working through the years. I mean, and working 7 days a week and, sleeping on conference room tables at radio stations and doing what you have to do to build your career. But it's about passion. It's about being invested. And it's, communication. I mean, again, that is so key. And social media, you have to watch that because we get used to being on our phones all the time. But it is about, the constant, putting in. And there's no such thing in my business. And I think in a lot of careers, frankly, about being a 9 to 5. If you're committed, if you're passionate, that's just not the way of the world. You want to have that balance in life. Don't get me wrong. But hopefully if you do something you're passionate about, it's never going to be like that. And, and I can certainly say in terms of here at Calvert Hall, boy, I certainly put the hours in. And when I left those doors senior year, I had a lot of pride, but I was proud that I had really made the most of my experience here. And it looks like a lot of the students here are doing the same thing. And that's great because you can get a lot out of it. And again, we talk about the pride in the community we have in Calvert Hall. There's a reason why I come back, why you've got graduates who come back here to help an alumni, to principal, to teach, what have you. it's because we love this place and we represent the brand, and we want people to experience it for themselves as well with students. And I think the aggressiveness that we're seeing, staying on top of the latest trends in education and curriculum, and also in terms of getting out and advancement, you guys going across the country and seeing alums and all that, and then the commitment to athletics here as well with the sports fields and the stadiums and the top-notch coaches and all of that. It's great. And we talk about a level of commitment and excellence, and that's what Calvert Hall is all about. So, yeah.
Well said. Well said. All right, we're gonna hit the last act. All right, wrapping up. But I give everybody, it's open mic time now. I give everybody a chance. I guess we'll start Chuck and work our way down. The chance to share a particular Calvert Hall memory, a teacher, something a message, whatever you want. It's your mic. Go ahead and it's open mic. Go ahead, Chuck.
Absolutely. That in terms of a teacher that's a memory, absolutely my mentor, and probably had a lot to do with me coming back here. His name was Brother Rene Sterner. Actually, it was just the anniversary of his death was just this week, so we mentioned that. And I'd say that the Rene was somebody who was a visionary. He actually had started the speech and debate program. I think put it to another level when he was here, and it really was that notion of taking a kid who had never done speech and debate before, never thought about it, and teaching him how to think and how to communicate. And I really do think that some of those life lessons that I learned here served me well throughout my life. Absolutely. Tom?
What was the question again, Joe?
A teacher, a moment.
I go back to having the great opportunity again. Being in a family that's been so connected to Calvert Hall over the years. My earliest memories are as a probably 5 or 6 year old coming to school on a Saturday morning with my dad because the alumni bull roast was coming up and he was meeting with Frank Clary, and Mr. Frank would always have a candy bar in his drawer for me. To then coming to school. As a student, having some of the greatest teachers on earth, and I'd be doing a disservice to try to mention all of them. But I will mention Bill Karpovich only because I had the great opportunity to play soccer for Carp, and then come back and work and be a colleague of his. And I remember the first time I saw him in the faculty lunchroom and approached him as Mr. Carp. It was Tom, you work here now. You can call me Bill or Carp or that kind of thing. So no, it's great, and it's also an honor. I gotta say, in 1980. September of 1980, I guess, to be in Mr. Baker's first Algebra 1 class. What an experience that was. The only thing I can remember was Mr. Baker throwing an eraser at us or something.
No, oh my gosh.
I'll give a shout out to two individuals. So for me, it was Mr. John Thaler and Mrs. Ann Hillgartner that really had an impact on my life. And it was Mr. Thaler who really sparked my interest in math as a student here at Calvert Hall. As a 14 or a 15-year-old, I had no clue what I wanted to be when I grew up, even as an 18-year-old and into my 20s. But Mr. Thaler really taught me more than just math itself. It was how to think critically, how to operate in gray areas when things are not always black and white. And that was something that I always appreciated and really kind of helped spark my analytical mind, which Chuck will get a laugh out of that. He knows that better than anybody. But once I graduated from college, I was a finance major. I had worked in the corporate finance world for a little bit. I was missing something inside of me, and I really didn't feel fulfilled or truly happy in that. And it was a relationship with Mrs. Hillgartner at Calvert Hall that I had leaned on at that point. It wasn't my mom or my wife that I had called to get some advice. I trusted Mrs. Hillgartner enough and believed in her relationship with me enough that she and I sat down and had lunch on campus here for 3-4 hours one afternoon, really just talked through a lot of different things, right? Picking my brain, talking about my strengths, my weaknesses, just continuing to get to know me as a person. And within a month or so of that conversation, I actually enrolled in a master's program in education. So in a lot of ways, I give Mrs. Hillgartner a lot of credit for bringing me back to Calvert Hall in this capacity. So those are the two that I would give a lot of credit to for me personally.
I'm going to take it back for 1 second, just because you touched on something. So as Joe mentioned, when I left in 2005, I had the good opportunity to work for Johns Hopkins Medicine in fundraising, grateful patient fundraising for the Department of Medicine, and worked for some really, really expert doctors. And to a T, the doctor's motto or mantra was, we treat the patient first and the disease second. It's always about the patient. And when you mentioned John Thaler, that's always been his mantra, is I teach us the student first, the subject second. It's always about the student.
Well, I tell you get put on the spot with, singling out necessarily a teacher or somebody here. I mean, there were so many for sure, and certainly in playing sports. I had actually Coach Eckrell, who's best known for baseball here, was my football coach for a couple of years as well. Coach Maselli as well, of course, legendary here as well. And the opportunities I received. I would just say, and one gentleman that sticks out who just passed recently, Brother Heron, I remember is a really good teacher of mine as well that I appreciated, and just the standards that they held you to. Here. And I remember there was a Brother Heron in my senior year was in his civics class, and I had a very good grade, late 95, 98. And I told Brother, I said, look, with this final, Brother, if I don't get a 100, this is going to bring my grade down. Is there any way that I could be let out? I mean, I'm good, but I'm not going to get 100. I was like, is there any way that I could be, and I was trying to be legitimate about this, so I could be let out and taking the final, because otherwise my grade's going to suffer. And he looked at me with he said, no, you're not getting out of that. But, that's one of the many that stands out. But he was a really good teacher. But I just think in general with the teachers here that they cared about you, and they wanted you to do well. They didn't accept, if you weren't doing well, they didn't accept that you're just gonna kind of languish. They wanted you to go and get the help, get the resources that were here. And I think the thing that stands out too, one of the things that's been a stalwart here, and we talk about organization and discipline and such, is the open segments that you have here. That look, you've got to be disciplined with your time if you're going to participate in sports or the band or whatever it may be, speech and debate, etc. That you have to take advantage of those to get your work done, go to the resource centers, and be able to get the help you may need in a specific subject and such. So those open periods I think are valuable, and I know that has continued here, and so that's something that really stands out, and certainly was a big help in college and once getting into your everyday life, I guess.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. Yeah, it's probably impossible just to think of one teacher, like a lot of us have said. Since I'm an English teacher, I'll start there. Uncle Mike McGrogan. I absolutely love taking AP English Literature with him. It was such an honor to be able to start teaching that class this year. I was asked recently by an alum, they said, do you still read Siddhartha? Bringing it back for next year's syllabus, still read Siddhartha, still read Hamlet. There's a lot of poems that I teach now that I first learned from Uncle Mike. I would also say Mr. Steve Hooper. I never was lucky enough to be able to take his class, but I vividly remember the first time I ever heard about him. It was in my carpool, and some of the other students in the car said, did you hear Mr. Hooper doesn't have a TV at his house? That he reads 100 books a year and rides his bike to school. And I'm 14 years old, and I was sitting there thinking, like, that's awesome. I want to be that guy. And for 7 years, I got to share a desk with him. For a little bit before I became a father, I was able to bike into school. I've ridden my bike around with him. And so as far as English, Uncle Mike and Steve Hooper are my heroes. But absolutely the reason why I chose to come to Calvert Hall, and the person that I've wanted to be ever since I was 14 years old and I first met him, would be Dr. Andy Moore, who I've mentioned was the director of the McMullen Scholars Program 2 directors ago. And Andy is someone who I was able to take humanities with, which is an art history and philosophy class from McMullen's. I then took AP French with him my senior year. And I wasn't necessarily an art history guy. At the time, I thought I was a French guy until I got a 2 on the AP exam. So I wasn't necessarily the best at those classes, but I absolutely loved them when I was able to study those subjects with Andy. And he was someone who just knew the subject better than anyone else. He was so excited about being able to teach that subject, but again, he was even more excited about building a relationship with us students as people. And that's something that I try and emulate in my class every day. So I'm probably a mix of Andy Moore, of Steve Hooper, of Uncle Mike McGurgan. And Andy, if you're watching, I know you're president of St. Mary's in Annapolis now, And I know it must be so nice looking out at Spa Creek every morning. I know you really miss the view of Panera, Andy, okay? So we don't want to hear about St. Mary's. Come on back to Coward Hall. But real quick, if I could also just share out some stories about students. Because now 8 years in as a teacher, I've been a teacher now. This is my third graduation. Twice as a teacher, once as a student. I've lost both my parents to cancer in the last 2 years, and I've lost my dad back in November. And there are three students. There's a lot of students who have helped me through this, but three who I'll mention in particular. Ben and Alex Brune, who I mentioned Ben with his amazing lawn capstone. Alex, I'm sure you know from all the different videos that he's worked on Coward Hall's behalf, some that you've probably watched today. I can't repeat the story. It involves some male humor about passing gas that was shared in their father's eulogy. But I will say that my son repeated that joke to me while we were driving down to see my dad for the last time. And it was a joke that I had first heard at the funeral for Ben and Alex's father. We both lost our fathers about a month apart from cancer this past fall. And I will absolutely say that Ben and Alex were my heroes as I lost my own dad. They gave me the courage to be able to be at my dad's side during his final days. Aside from that, I recently got a call, like many of you may have, as part of All Day Hall Day, from some students reaching out to donors. I got a call from Logan Zeller, who graduated last year, the class of 2022. And I taught Logan his freshman year in English. Logan's now heading into his sophomore year at the University of South Carolina. And a few days right before my dad was about to die, I went to my faculty mailbox and I had a letter from a church in Columbia, South Carolina. I said, this is kind of weird. How do I get a letter from a church in Columbia? That's where my dad grew up. My dad also went to the University of South Carolina. And so I figured something has to do with him, but no, instead it's a letter from Logan. And it says, Mr. Hallman, I've joined a faith-based group here at South Carolina. It's been really instrumental in my my life as I adjust to college, but also it means a lot to me personally in times of my faith. And it was asking for a donation. And what was so profound about that was actually, I would say, like my last real conversation with my dad. He shared out about a faith-based group that he had joined at the University of South Carolina and how that shaped the course of his life ever since he had joined it almost 40 years before. So to get that letter from Logan about his faith group at South Carolina and then my dad, it was just, it was transcendent to think of God's grace as it showed up in that way. So I recently was able to share with Logan how much that meant to me. So it's not just the teachers who have been a part of who I am, but my students absolutely shaped the person who I am too. I'm very grateful for how they've helped me to get through losing both of my parents.
Thanks for sharing, Dave. Thank you. Well, I'd like to thank everybody on the panel. It was a great panel. It's a great different views and experiences, but that's why Coward Hall is a special place. Everybody brings some of their own talents to the school every day. If you're with us, we're now at $261,000 raised, 745 gifts. Tonight at 8, we'll be running the premiere of the Ocho, 8-minute segments with students who will discuss their experience at Coward Hall. I've said it before, I'll say it again, unscripted. Right, Joe Baker did a little rapid fire, like let's give me something to work with, and then I worked off of that. Guys did a great job telling me what they do, how they do it, why they do it, etc. If you want to get a sense of Calvert Hall, this group gave a pretty good sense. But if you want to get a real sense of the students of Calvert Hall, join us for the Ocho tonight. It'll be the best 3.5 hours of cinema you've ever seen. If you liked Hamlet, if you like Siddhartha, you're going to want to watch the Ocho. All right? Thanks for joining with us. Stay with us. It's